Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something massive, a strictly objective, fact-based look at one of the most significant and fast-moving geopolitical crises of our time, the 2026 conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran. This is a situation that has literally commanded the entire world's attention. It's shifting global markets, rewriting international security, and affecting the lives of millions. So our goal today is to cut right through the noise. We're relying purely on verified reporting from heavy hitters like Reuters, the Associated Press, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the UK Parliament to answer the big questions. How did this actually begin? Why is it happening right now? And what on earth does it mean for the rest of us? Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap. First, we'll cover the decades of rising tensions. Then, the February 2026 trigger. Why the war continues, the global economic impact, the security and humanitarian toll, and finally, the current evolving situation. Section 1, Decades of Rising Tensions, the Roots of the Crisis. To really understand where we are right now, we've got to look backward. This war absolutely did not emerge overnight in a vacuum. It is the culmination of decades of ideological, economic, and military friction. We can trace the roots of this crisis all the way back to 1979. The Iranian Revolution resulted in the complete severance of diplomatic ties between the US and Iran, setting up a hostile relationship that has lasted for generations. In the decades that followed, two huge factors defined the landscape: heavy American economic sanctions meant to isolate Iran, and skyrocketing international anxiety over Iran's nuclear program. Then, in the years right before 2026, the region saw a massive escalation of proxy conflicts. Iran was steadily increasing its support for armed allied groups across Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. Meanwhile, the US and Israel viewed this expanding network as a direct existential threat to their security.
Moving on to Section 2, the February 2026 trigger, the spark that ignited war. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just how rapidly stalled diplomacy escalated into unprecedented direct military action. We really have to separate the long-term history from the immediate trigger. Step 1. Diplomatic efforts over the nuclear program completely collapsed. The U.S. demanded a total halt to uranium enrichment, and Iran flat-out refused, citing its right to a peaceful nuclear program. Step 2, viewing Iran as dangerously close to actually developing a nuclear weapon, the U.S. and Israel launched massive preemptive airstrikes on Iranian military and nuclear facilities. This happened on February 28, 2026. Crucially, these strikes resulted in the deaths of high-ranking Iranian officials, including Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Step 3. Iran immediately retaliated. They unleashed extensive drone and ballistic missile attacks on Israel, as well as on American military bases scattered across the region. To ground our understanding here, take a look at this consensus from geopolitical analysts, including the Council on Foreign Relations and the UK Parliament. They point out that the current war was not caused by a single incident, but by a heavy accumulation of tensions over the Iranian nuclear program, regional influence, and security. Basically, it's like a giant powder keg that had been filling up for nearly 50 years. The events of February 28th, that was just the match. Which brings us to Section 3, Why the War Continues, an ongoing stalemate. So observers all over the world are constantly asking the same thing. When you have some of the most powerful and well-equipped militaries on the entire planet locked in combat, why hasn't either side been able to achieve a decisive military victory? Why does this stalemate persist? And this brilliantly illustrates the answer. We're looking at a textbook case of asymmetric warfare. On one side, you have the US and Israel. They possess immense, highly advanced air and naval superiority, and they rely heavily on high-tech missile defense systems. Their strategic goal, preventing Iranian regional dominance. But then, on the other side, you have Iran. They leverage massive, geographically dispersed arsenals of ballistic missiles and drones right alongside a vast, deeply entrenched network of regional proxy militias. Their main objective is to push foreign military influence out of the region entirely. Because these are two incredibly different ways of fighting, pulling off a traditional, quick military victory is almost impossible for either side. Plus, the underlying issues are still totally unresolved. The Iranian nuclear program, the very thing that sparked those preemptive strikes, is still the central point of contention. And since neither side can easily overpower the other, both have locked into deliberate strategies of economic and military attrition. They're essentially just trying to exhaust the enemy's resources over time. As a result, the conflict has violently spilled over its original borders, expanding via allied militias into Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and heavily impacting the Red Sea. All right, Section 4, Impact on Global Economy, the Ripple Effect. This is not just a Middle Eastern crisis, it is a massive global economic event. To understand exactly why, we have to look at the geography, specifically the Strait of Hormuz. This is a critical, incredibly narrow maritime choke point that is absolutely essential for international oil trade. A huge percentage of the entire world's energy supply passes through this specific body of water. And with the ongoing conflict, shipping routes here have been severely disrupted. When the Strait of Hormuz gets disrupted, the economic pain is felt globally, and it happens immediately. As you can see, global oil prices are surging due to fears of supply shortages. Shipping insurance costs are spiking because vessels face severe risks just navigating through conflict zones. And ultimately, that directly translates to rising consumer inflation. When energy and transportation cost more to secure, the price of everyday goods in countries thousands of miles away just keeps going up.
Section 5. Security and Humanitarian Toll, the Cost of Conflict. Beyond the economic charts and market fluctuations, there's a profound human and international security cost to this prolonged stalemate. Verified reporting from organizations like The Guardian paints a really grim picture on the ground. The conflict has resulted in thousands of civilian casualties and widespread injuries. We're seeing mass displacement, which is generating a massive regional refugee crisis as entire families flee combat zones. Critical infrastructure, think power, water, civilian services, has faced severe destruction. And as a direct result, parts of the region are dealing with escalating severe shortages of basic food supplies and essential medicines. So the crucial point here is how this regional war is dramatically draining global resources and testing international security frameworks. On the left, we see heightened global tensions. The U.S. and its NATO allies have significantly increased their military deployments to the Middle East. That, in turn, is escalating friction with global powers like Russia and China over the shifting balance of power. And on the right, military resources are being stretched to their absolute limits. Global defense spending is surging. Notably, according to sources tracking defense logistics, the constant need to shoot down incoming drones and missiles is placing a massive, continuous strain on U.S. stockpiles of advanced interceptor missiles. Finally, Section 6, the evolving current situation, what comes next? Taking all of this into account, the history, the explosive trigger, the asymmetric warfare, and the global fallout, where do things actually stand right now? Well, the situation remains incredibly fluid and dangerous. Military operations are continuously evolving across multiple borders, making it a highly volatile theater of war. International organizations, notably the UN, are scrambling to mediate and find some sort of diplomatic off-ramp. At the same time, we're seeing complex diplomatic maneuvers play out. For instance, recent reports from Reuters highlight strategic pauses, with leaders indicating they're holding off on fresh attacks in the immediate term, hoping to force a quick diplomatic deal or ceasefire. It is a very fragile balancing act between military pressure and back-channel negotiations. We've seen today that this conflict is definitely not the result of a single isolated event. It is a deep web of decades-old geopolitical tensions, nuclear anxieties, and rapid military escalation. The economic and humanitarian consequences are rippling across the globe, sparing almost no nation from its effects. So I want to leave you with this final thought to consider. Given the deep historical roots and the incredibly complex global consequences we've explored today, how will this multi-layered crisis ultimately reshape the future of international stability? Thank you so much for joining this explainer. Keep asking questions and keep seeking the facts.